Rareware were on a roll, releasing one masterpiece after another, and at last the time has come to look at the game that made them the undisputed kings of the N64. Not too long after the release of Donkey Kong Country, Rare would begin work on their next big project. Codenamed Dream, the game was to be an epic RPG about a Peter Pan type character trying to rescue his girlfriend from pirates. It was to use the same pre-rendered graphics as DKC and would support a dynamically changing soundtrack. Enthusiasm for the project fell off pretty quickly. The team struggled to get the technology to work the way they wanted to, even when development moved to the N64. They also grew bored with the premise, and worst of all, what little of the game they had gotten done just wasn't any fun. Then Rare got a chance to sample an early build of Super Mario 64. Having gotten a glimpse of the future, Rare would throw everything out and start from scratch. So the RPG became a 3D platformer, the pre-rendered graphics became full 3D, the main character was dropped in favor of a honeybee side character, and Project Dream would become Banjo-Kazooie. The game centers around the Wicked Witch Gruntilda, who believes herself to be the fairest of them all, despite, well, the obvious. When her magic cauldron shatters her safe space and informs her that the title belongs to a young honey bear named Tootie, Grunty kidnaps Tootie with the intention of putting her through a machine that will transfer her beauty to her. Doesn't seem like the smartest of plans. I mean, the standards of beauty probably differ between bears and green-skinned witches, so I'd imagine that it would... Well, I'll be damned. Not wanting his sister to get beaten with the ugly stick, Tootie's big brother Banjo and his buddy Kazooie step up to enter Grunty's tower and save the day. Plot Banjo-Kazooie might sound a little silly and childish, but that's only because it is. However, in a similar fashion to the Shrek films, Banjo-Kazooie presents a lot of these childish cliches in a very cynical adult mindset. Yeah, while a lot of the game is taking influence from kindergarten fables, the writing is witty and at times hilariously mean-spirited. Grunty is a surprisingly threatening villain, and at times it can be downright scary. Banjo-Kazooie is one of those games that everyone played as a kid and can name at least one moment that scared the shit out of them. Does that make the game a little frightening for kids? Sure, but it also makes it stick with them more. It's a game I enjoy a lot as a kid, but I really love it as an adult, and I know I'm not alone in that sentiment. It also helps that the game features some of the best characters in any game period. Banjo and Kazooie complement each other beautifully. Banjo is polite but lazy, and Kazooie is rude and adventurous. The way the two play off each other, as well as all the colorful characters they come across throughout the game, is just masterfully done. I especially love when Kazooie and Bottles go at it. Grunty is a memorable video game villain as well, able to be both very scary but also really funny at the same time. It's a great cast of characters, and they are brought to life by some exceptional graphics. The models are complex, beautifully animated, and wildly creative. The rest of the game is of a similar quality as well. The levels are big and detailed with a wide variety of memorable themes, and the performance is rock solid. In fact, I'd go as far as to say that Banjo-Kazooie represents the peak of what the N64 is capable of. While it is true that Rare and other developers would continue to push the limits of what the console could do with more detail and bigger levels, Banjo-Kazooie represents that sweet spot where you can have outstanding graphics without the performance taking a hit, which is the problem the later games on the console had. It's a fine example where art style and scope and technology all find perfect balance. The sound design is full of bursting with charm. Rare actually found a clever way to get some voice acting in there without actually having anyone speak. The game has each character's dialogue be accompanied by gibberish, which might sound like an incidental touch, but I find that when people read it with that gibberish, they hear a specific voice in their head. I'd wager the voice you heard in your head sounded a lot like the one in mine. The music is neat in that it dynamically changes to suit what is going on screen. For example, the most common track in the game is the theme to Grunty's lair, and every time you approach the entrance of a level, the instrumentation changes. It's not as if the music stops and starts, the change is seamless. Might seem like a small touch, but it couldn't have been easy to program. It's yet another fine example of Rare's mastery of the N64's hardware. Getting into the gameplay, most people look at Banjo-Kazooie as the Super Mario 64 clone, and that's not too far off base. Grunty's Tower serves as a hub world, much like Princess Peach's castle, and within the tower are entrances to various levels. Within the levels are these things called jiggies, which you will attain by finding them out in the world or completing a variety of objectives. The more jiggies you have, the more levels you will be able to access. It's basically Super Mario 64 note for note, and that's fine. I mean, yeah, Banjo-Kazooie was the first to rip off Super Mario 64, but it sure as hell wouldn't be the last. It's okay if the game has taken influence from another, as long as it takes steps to stand on its own, and Banjo-Kazooie manages to achieve that. It does this mostly by putting more focus on exploration. In Super Mario 64, you were generally directed to focus on one power star at a time, and once you got it, you'd be booted out of the level. In Banjo-Kazooie, you aren't really given any direction when you enter a level. Where the jiggies are hidden is up to you to figure out, and when you find one, you aren't kicked out of the level. So you can get all the jiggies in one go if you want to. There's also lots of other stuff to collect in the levels. Outside of jiggies, I would say the most important collectibles are the notes, of which there are 100 in each level. You need these to unlock new sections of Grunty's lair, and they do a good job showing you where you have and have not been. There's also Mumbo tokens, which you can give to Mumbo Jumbo for transformations, and 5 Genjos, which will give you a jiggy once you find them all. Because of this, I feel compelled to explore a level before moving on to the next one, whereas in Super Mario 64, I often found myself alternating between levels since I was always kicked out of them after collecting a power star. The other big thing you need to be on the lookout for are dirt mounds, because this is where you get the most important collectible in the game, the moves. In Mario 64, players had the full breadth of Mario's moveset from the get-go, but the moves took some skill to execute. In Banjo-Kazooie, you start out with a more basic moveset and learn new ones throughout the game. This gives the game a greater sense of progression than Mario 64, as it feels like the game is always evolving. The trade-off is that the moves are easier to execute, so it takes less skill to play this game, which I think brings us nicely to the big question. Which do I prefer between this and Mario 64? Well, I gotta be honest, I think I prefer Mario 64. I don't know, being able to alternate between levels as well as the higher skill ceiling makes it a little more replayable in my opinion. Whenever I play Mario 64, I often find myself experimenting and trying new things, whereas when I play Banjo-Kazooie, I play it the same way almost every single time. Mario 64's design just makes for a more free-form experience, whereas Banjo-Kazooie is a more structured experience. And as far as the structured experience goes, Banjo-Kazooie is great. Really, the issues with this game are few and far between, well, at least until you get to the end of the game. After making your way to the top of Grunty's Tower, you'd think you'd go straight to a boss fight with the Wicked Witch herself, only to instead have to play a crappy trivia board game. God, I hate this part of the game. Most of the questions are related to your experience, and that's fine, but then you have stuff like the minigame challenges, personal questions about Grunty, and instant death spots that, well, kill you instantly. Even if it's an easy question, they have a nasty habit of throwing in 2 answers that are very similar, a trap that is easy to fall into since you only have 10 seconds to answer the question. I didn't die often when I was playing this game, but this part of the game ate through several sets of lives before I finally got through, only to be met with false credits, another note door, and the realization I had to go back and get every jiggy I missed. God, talk about botching the landing, guys. And what frustrates me most about this is that for reasons I will never understand, this became something of a calling card for Rare. Banjo-Tooie, Donkey Kong 64, Jet Force Gemini, even Yooka-Laylee has shit like this. For the love of lifeson, you British assholes, cut it out! However, while Banjo-Kazooie botches the landing big time, the dismount is fantastic, and it seems like everyone agrees because Banjo-Kazooie was huge in its day. It sold like hotcakes, won critical acclaim, and is still regarded as one of the console's signature games. It was so successful that Rare would almost instantly begin work on a sequel. Banjo-Tooie released in 2000 and is for sure one of the best sequels of all time. It raises the stakes with a darker story, it ups the size and scale of everything, and builds upon the gameplay rather than hitting the reset button. Seriously, how many video game sequels can you think of where you have to collect the same moves and power-ups as in the first game? Most of them, right? Banjo-Tooie is one of the few cases I can think of where instead of losing all your powers from the first game, you have all of them from the get-go and have to collect new ones throughout the game, Why isn't that a standard? I will never understand that, but boy is it cool. That being said, I wouldn't say that Banjo-Tooie is the superior game. The level design may have gone a little too broad and complex, and the game's performance leaves something to be desired. Thankfully, there exists an alternative to the N64 game. Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie would both be ported up to the Xbox 360 in 2008, and these are undeniably the best versions of the game. The graphics are cleaner, the frame rate is jacked up to 60 FPS, and they add some cut content from the N64 games. So if you have the option, I highly recommend playing these versions of the games. They are both for sale individually or as part of Rare Replay, and they are one of the few reasons to hang on to an Xbox. Seriously, the only reason I haven't sold mine yet is because Microsoft for some reason is hesitant to release these on PC. Banjo-Tooie hinted at the pending release of a third game, and though Rare would demonstrate what Banjo-Kazooie would look like on GameCube, the game would never make it into production. Not too long after Nintendo brought the GameCube to market, Microsoft would buy Rare out from under the big N, making Banjo-Kazooie an Xbox exclusive franchise, though there were a few handheld games released for the GBA. Microsoft would then proceed to sit on the beloved franchise until 2008 when they finally released a new game in the series. Sadly, it was nuts and bolts. Okay, that's harsh. I gotta be honest, I feel the hate towards nuts and bolts is a little overblown. Don't get me wrong, I would have preferred a proper Banjo-Kazooie game that took advantage of modern hardware, but for what nuts and bolts is, I think it's pretty good. I'd actually recommend it if you have an Xbox. Sadly, nuts and bolts' overall reception was lukewarm, so Microsoft was quick to put the Bear and Bird back on the shelf. Since 2008, Banjo-Kazooie have mostly been relegated to cameo appearances, such as appearing in Sonic and All-Star Racing for the Xbox, and Super Smash Bros. Ultimate as playable characters. This is in spite of the fact that there is still high fan demand for the series. So much, in fact, that when a group of Rare employees struck out on their own and put up a Kickstarter for a Banjo-Kazooie spiritual successor, they got their funding in record time. And though Yooka-Laylee didn't exactly meet everyone's expectations, it was still the closest thing to a proper Banjo-Kazooie game that we've gotten in years. But that does beg the question, will there ever be another game in the series? Well, that's a tough one. There are rumblings at the moment that Microsoft has given up on hardware, and if that happens, I fear it might mean the end of Rare. Microsoft has never made an effort to release Rare's work on PC, so if Xbox goes under, they probably will too. Now, there's always a chance that someone else could buy the company, but if that does happen, I doubt it will be anyone we'd want it to be. I doubt Nintendo or Sony are going to pony up the money at this point, given how far the brand has fallen, and I'd rather not see Rare go under Activision's banner. They've suffered enough under Microsoft. Only time will tell, so we'll just have to be patient and see what happens. So yeah, Banjo-Kazooie has had a rough go at it since their N64 days, but that doesn't take away from how good those N64 games are. There's a reason the game has remained one of the iconic titles for the console. If you are an N64 fan and you haven't played Banjo-Kazooie or Banjo-Tooie, well, you likely haven't been collecting for the thing for very long. Even if you aren't interested in playing on hardware, I still recommend giving them a shot on Nintendo Switch Online and especially Xbox Live if you have the option. It's one of my all-time favorite games and one I'm likely to revisit again in the near future.